What would you do if your sister texted you, "See you tomorrow," and tomorrow never came? This is the story of Wilma Andersson, a 17-year-old girl from Sweden. A daughter, a sister, a teenager with her whole life ahead of her. On November 14th, 2019, Wilma disappeared. Her family searched. Her neighbors searched. Over 5,000 volunteers joined the hunt. 5,000 people who refused to give up hope. But sometimes, the truth is hiding closer than we think. This isn't fiction. This isn't Hollywood. This is real. And what happened to Wilma shocked an entire nation. Stay with me, because this story needs to be told. November 14th, 2019. A normal Thursday in Sweden. 17-year-old Wilma Andersson had one simple task: pick up her things from her ex-boyfriend's apartment. She called her mom first. "I'll be spending the evening with a friend," she said. Then she texted her sister Emily, "See you at the dentist tomorrow." But Emily never saw her sister again. The next day came. No Wilma at the dentist. Emily tried calling, straight to voicemail. Her parents tried too. Nothing. For 3 days, silence. Then on November 17th, the family made a decision that would change everything. They went to Tishko's apartment. At first he wouldn't open the door, wouldn't even answer. But eventually, he let them in. When they asked about Wilma, something was off. He acted surprised, almost like the question caught him completely off guard. His story was simple. Wilma came over November 14th, just to grab her things. They argued. She left. And then he added something chilling. "I don't want to talk to her anymore." The family listened carefully. They didn't accuse him. Not yet. But deep down, they knew something was terribly wrong. That same day, Emily made a crucial decision. She posted about her missing sister online. Her parents rushed straight to police. The story spread like wildfire. Local media picked it up. Soon, hundreds of volunteers joined the search. An entire community united, determined to bring Wilma home. Meanwhile, detectives began their methodical work. They needed to interview everyone close to Wilma. Their first call? Tishko. He repeated his story word for word. After November 14th, he never saw her again. He swore he never even left his apartment that night. The interview seemed routine. Then Tishko said something that changed everything. "Maybe she found a new boyfriend," he suggested. Then came the line that made detectives' blood run cold. "She's that kind of girl." To seasoned investigators, this wasn't helpful information. This was deflection. This was blame shifting. And suddenly, Tishko wasn't just a witness anymore. Detectives turned to Wilma's inner circle. Her friends, her family. The story they heard was disturbing. Lately, Tishko had become controlling, possessive, dangerously jealous. Police seized his phone. What they found confirmed their worst fears. Message after message of fights, arguments, and threats. Then came the breakthrough. Cell tower data revealed something crucial. On November 14th, around 6 p.m., Tishko's phone had moved. He had left his apartment. He had lied to police. Investigators questioned his cousins next. They'd met him at a local cafe just days after Wilma vanished. When police asked about Wilma directly, Tishko's response was ice cold. "Our relationship is over. I don't care what happened to her." Those words sealed his fate. Tishko Ahmed Kargbo was now their prime suspect. November 19th arrived. Police had their warrant. They were about to search his apartment. What they would find inside would shock even veteran investigators. When investigators stepped inside the apartment, They immediately knew something was terribly wrong. On the walls, traces of violence. Clear signs that a brutal struggle had taken place in this very room. Forensic experts arrived with special chemicals. What they revealed on the bed would haunt even seasoned investigators. A human outline appeared, but this outline, it was cut off at the base of the neck. The apartment told Wilma's story, piece by piece. Her shoes by the door, her bag on the floor, her wallet, her glasses. Everything she had with her that final night. In trash bags, investigators found more of her belongings. Items someone had tried desperately to hide. Then neighbors began to talk. They'd heard the couple argue before, but November 14th was different. The noise was louder, more violent, more desperate. One neighbor couldn't ignore it anymore. He walked to their door, raised his hand to knock, when suddenly, complete silence. For police, that silence told the whole story. Something violent had happened inside that apartment. Something final. But even with all this evidence, Wilma's body was nowhere to be found. As investigators prepared to leave, one detective snapped a photo of something by the closet door. A simple suitcase. At the time, it seemed completely ordinary. They had no idea what horror that suitcase contained. During another round of questioning, Tishko denied everything, any role in Wilma's disappearance, any connection whatsoever. But police had seen enough evidence. They placed him in custody, suspected of murder. Meanwhile, the blood found in that apartment, the blood on that knife, was racing to the lab for DNA analysis. Soon, they would know for certain if it belonged to Wilma Andersson. But as investigators waited for those results, as Tishko sat in his cell, there was something else the world needed to understand. Wilma wasn't just a missing person case number. She wasn't just evidence scattered in an apartment. She was a vibrant 17-year-old girl whose life had been stolen far too soon. And her story would reveal exactly why this case shook an entire nation to its core. Wilma Andersson should have been celebrating her 18th birthday. Instead, she became the center of Sweden's most heartbreaking missing person case. Born on a summer day in July 2002, Wilma was the baby of the family. Her older sister Emily wasn't just a sibling. She was Wilma's protector, her guide, her best friend. When their parents divorced, both girls handled it with remarkable maturity. They split time between homes, welcomed new stepbrothers with open arms, and found joy in simple moments, like feeding animals on their father's small farm. To everyone around her, Wilma seemed to have it all figured out. Good grades, loyal friends, teachers who adored her work ethic. At 15, she even moved in with Emily, showing incredible independence. But beneath that confident exterior, Wilma was struggling. Like so many teenagers, she felt lost. She questioned where she belonged in this world. She wondered if she'd ever find her true purpose. Wilma had beautiful dreams. She wanted her own apartment, complete independence. She dreamed of becoming an interior designer, creating beautiful spaces where families could build memories. But at 17, those dreams took a back seat. Wilma fell in love. And like many young women before her, she had no idea that this relationship would become her greatest danger. The young man who captured Wilma's heart would ultimately break far more than just her dreams. When 20-year-old Tishko Ahmed Sherzad first saw Wilma, she was just 15 years old. To him, she wasn't a person with dreams and aspirations. She was a target. From their very first meeting, there were warning signs. Signs that everyone who loved Wilma would soon learn to recognize. Signs they'd wish they'd seen sooner. Tishko had spent years perfecting a dangerous skill. He could spot vulnerability from across a room. Pause twos. He knew exactly how to approach a lonely teenager. Pause twos. How to make her feel special before the control began. His difficult childhood, his struggles in Sweden. None of it excused what he was planning to do to Wilma. Because Tishko had learned something dangerous over the years. When you can't control your own pain, building tension, you find someone weaker to control instead. And Wilma, searching for love and acceptance, feeling lost at just 15, was exactly what he'd been hunting for. What Wilma thought was romance. Actually the beginning of a nightmare. Because Tishko didn't want a girlfriend. He wanted complete ownership. Linda had every reason to worry. Her daughter, barely 16, dating a 21-year-old man. But Tishko was clever. He knew exactly how to win over a concerned mother. Slowly, carefully, he convinced Linda he was different. He was mature, responsible. He truly loved Wilma. And Linda, wanting her daughter to be happy, began to believe him. When Emily had her first baby, Wilma felt displaced in her sister's home. She was thrilled to be an aunt, but suddenly felt like an outsider in the place she'd called home. Tishko saw his chance. When Wilma mentioned feeling out of place, he had the perfect solution ready. "Move in with my family," he suggested. "Just temporarily, until we find our own place." At Tishko's family home, Wilma felt welcomed. His father was especially kind, taking walks with her, shopping together, making her feel valued. But what Wilma didn't realize was that this kindness served a purpose. When his family embraced her, it validated Tishko's character. It made Wilma trust him completely. And when someone trusts you completely, they stop watching for warning signs. Soon, Tishko found them an apartment. Finally, Wilma thought, they'd have their own space. For the first time in months, she felt like she belonged somewhere. What she didn't know was that she'd just walked into a carefully constructed trap. The mask came off within weeks. What Wilma thought was love was actually the beginning of a carefully orchestrated prison. First, it was small things. Comments about her clothes, questions about where she'd been. Then Tishko started following her, checking her phone, deciding who she could see. A simple hello to another man would trigger explosive rage. Tishko would make scenes in public, screaming at Wilma in front of strangers, making sure everyone knew she belonged to him. By December 2018, the messages on her phone had turned deadly. Not just angry words anymore, but detailed threats about what would happen if she ever tried to leave. Then came the GPS tracker. Tishko installed an app on Wilma's phone that showed him her exact location, every minute of every day. This wasn't jealousy anymore. This was complete surveillance. The fights became so violent that neighbors could hear them through the walls. Shouting, crashing, sometimes terrifying silence. When Tishko would finally break up with her, Wilma would flee to Emily's house. But within days, he'd return with apologies, flowers, promises to change. And Wilma, desperate to believe in the man she'd fallen in love with, would go back. Linda and Emily watched their vibrant, confident Wilma disappear. The girl who once lit up every room was becoming a shadow of herself. Linda begged her daughter to come home, but Wilma refused. What none of them realized was that leaving an abuser is often the most dangerous time. And Tishko had already decided, if he couldn't control Wilma, no one could. By late 2019, Wilma had become a prisoner in her own home. Days passed in silence, waiting for Tishko to return from work. But while she waited, he was planning a life that didn't include her at all. Tishko had become obsessed with American politics. In his twisted mind, Donald Trump needed his help to win the 2020 election. And Wilma, because she didn't share his political views, had become the enemy. He started calling her Satan. He believed she was working with the Democrats, against everything he stood for. This wasn't jealousy anymore. This was complete psychological breakdown. In September 2019, Tishko bought a plane ticket to Miami. October 30th. He was going to America to help with the election. He never mentioned bringing Wilma with him. When he told Wilma about his plan, she finally understood. After years of control, surveillance, and abuse, he was simply going to abandon her. The fight that followed ended their relationship. On October 30th, Tishko boarded his flight to Miami. But at Stockholm Airport, immigration officials stopped him. Missing travel documents, visa violations. His American dream shattered in minutes. When Tishko returned home, humiliated and furious, he called Wilma. He begged for another chance. And Wilma, still believing in the man she'd once loved, agreed to try again. But this time was different. Emily had finally convinced her sister of the truth. Tishko wasn't the man Wilma needed in her life. In November 2019, Wilma made the bravest decision of her life. She broke up with Tishko. For good. For the first time in years, Wilma began planning her own future. She wanted her driver's license, her independence, her freedom. She'd even arranged lessons with her father. But Tishko had already decided. If he couldn't have Wilma, if he couldn't control her, then no one could. Those driving lessons would never happen. November 28th. 2 weeks after Wilma vanished, police returned to Tishko's apartment. This time, they brought a specially trained cadaver dog, flown in from Germany. But the dog wasn't even needed. The moment investigators stepped inside, they smelled it. Heavy, unmistakable, the smell of death. It led them straight to a closet, to a suitcase they had photographed during their first search, but never opened. When they unzipped it, they found Wilma. But the suitcase was just the beginning. As detectives continued searching, they found more of Wilma's belongings scattered throughout the apartment. Her clothes, personal items, even her childhood stuffed animals. While hundreds of volunteers had spent weeks searching the countryside for Wilma, she had been in Tishko's closet the entire time. The media immediately raised the question everyone was thinking. How had police missed this during their first search? The forensic results came back within days. On the suspected murder weapon, investigators found 14 separate DNA traces. Every single one matched Tishko. DNA analysis of the remains confirmed what everyone already knew, but no one wanted to believe. It was Wilma. Experts could never determine the exact cause of death, but the evidence told a horrific story. Severe injuries, major head trauma. Wilma had suffered tremendously before she died. On Wilma's remains, investigators found Tishko's fingerprints. The same prints appeared on bags containing blood-stained clothing. The evidence was overwhelming. Wilma had been murdered, and there was only one suspect. The search for Wilma became the largest missing person operation in Swedish history. By late November, Sweden's armed forces joined the hunt. Divers plunged into icy waters, Mini-submarines scoured the depths, but it wasn't enough. By December, over 5,000 people were searching. Volunteers, police, military personnel, all desperate to bring Wilma home. They found nothing. Most of Wilma's body was gone forever. For Wilma's family, this meant something unbearable. They couldn't hold a funeral. How do you say goodbye when most of your daughter is still missing? December 6th, Tishko's first custody hearing. When prosecutors laid out all the evidence against him, he said nothing. For 27 minutes, complete silence. Finally, he spoke. "Can I use the bathroom?" Later, when shown photos of what they'd found in his apartment, his only words, "That's brutal." Then silence again. In every interrogation that followed, no comment, but something was happening behind that silence. A psychiatric evaluation suggested he might suffer from a serious mental disorder. The question was this genuine illness or calculated manipulation? Months passed. Then suddenly, Tishko broke his silence. His words were chilling. "Everyone's forgetting that Wilma was the girl I loved. I always did the right thing." Then he said something that stunned investigators. "If I really killed her, I would never have left the head as evidence." March 13th, 2020, official murder charges. Days later, guards found Tishko unconscious in his cell. Beside him, suicide notes. "God knows I am innocent. I am not a killer. I am going to my love. You will never solve Wilma's murder. I decide my own life." Was this a final confession? Or the desperate act of a guilty man trying to escape justice? Before the trial, investigators pieced together Wilma's final moments. November 14th, 2019. Wilma went to collect her belongings from Tishko's apartment. She thought she was safe. But Tishko came home early. An argument erupted. What happened next? Investigators believe was a violent attack that ended Wilma's life. Then came the cover-up. Phone data shows Tishko leaving his apartment at 6 p.m., carrying something heavy, something he needed to hide. But here's what makes this case even more disturbing. While thousands of people searched for Wilma, while her family begged for answers, Tishko was at McDonald's. November 18th, 4 days after Wilma disappeared. He sat there with his cousins, eating, laughing, acting like nothing had happened. Like the girl he claimed to love wasn't decomposing in his apartment closet. May 26, 2021. The trial began in Uddevalla. Prosecutors painted a clear picture. Tishko killed Wilma using repeated extreme violence. But his defense attorney, Beatrice Ramsel, had a shocking theory. She claimed the evidence was planted. Her argument: police searched that apartment and found nothing. Then suddenly, days later, they find Wilma's remains? She suggested someone put them there to frame her client. It was a desperate defense. But was there any truth to it? June 16th, the moment of truth. Prosecutors demanded life in prison. The defense? Complete acquittal? The next day, the court made their decision. Tishko would remain in custody for psychiatric evaluation. The question everyone wanted answered. Was he mentally ill? Or just evil? July 15th, the psychiatric report arrived. No severe mental disorder. No psychosis. No excuse. What they found was something far more chilling. Narcissistic personality disorder. shallow emotions, zero empathy, complete inability to see Wilma as anything more than his property. He wasn't insane. He was exactly what Wilma's family always suspected: a cold-blooded killer. July 27th, 2021. Guilty of murder. Guilty of desecrating a body. Life in prison. 230,000 kroner in compensation. But here's the truth no court can fix. Most of Wilma's body is still out there somewhere. Tishko didn't just murder his ex-girlfriend. He stole her family's right to say goodbye. He stole their chance for closure. And that might be his cruelest crime of all. Cases like Wilma's remind us why we do this work. Every victim deserves their story told. Every family deserves justice. If you believe these stories matter, if you want to help us honor victims like Wilma, subscribe to The Dark Side, because the truth should never be forgotten. We'll see you next time with another case that demands justice.